They skipped my college graduation to plan my sister's birthday party. They didn't ask what time it started. They didn't ask if I needed a ride. So I went alone. And I thought that would be the end of it, until something happened on that stage that none of them expected. My name appeared on every screen. People I'd never met stood up and clapped. And suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. This isn't just a story about being forgotten. It's about choosing to rise anyway, and becoming someone you would be proud of. Stick around until the end, because the way this story turns around might just change the way you see your own. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and hit like. These stories deserve to be heard. I had always imagined my college graduation would be one of those rare moments where everything just paused. Where people I loved would finally look up and see what I had been building for years. I didn't need banners or balloons. I just wanted them there. But as the day grew closer, it became painfully obvious that my family wasn't paying attention. All the conversations at home revolved around my little sister's sweet 16 party. It was going to be big, rented venue, a DJ, custom cake, even a dress she flew to Miami to pick out. I couldn't blame her. She was excited. But every time I tried to talk about my ceremony, someone would change the subject. Or worse, pretend they hadn't heard me. At dinner one night, I mentioned the time and location of my graduation. My mom didn't even look up from her phone. "Sweetheart, I really don't know how we're going to manage both things on the same day," she said. "Your sister's party is already locked in." My dad added, "It's just a ceremony, right? You'll have plenty more." I didn't argue. What was the point? I just nodded and said I understood. I even forced a smile so they wouldn't feel guilty. But inside, it burned. That night, alone in my room, I laid out my cap and gown on the bed and stared at them. It felt surreal. I had worked part-time jobs, pulled all-nighters, skipped holidays, and stretched every dollar I had just to stay in school. And yet, at the finish line, I was invisible. The next morning, I got a message from my college: "Reminder, graduates must arrive 1 hour early. Let's celebrate your hard-earned success." I wanted to feel proud, but I couldn't shake the emptiness. I watched my sister rehearse her dance for the party in the living room. My parents clapped. My aunt even cried. I went back to my room and quietly printed the directions to my graduation venue. No one asked why. I told myself it didn't matter. That maybe this was a lesson in independence. Maybe not every chapter of success comes with applause. But deep down, I still hoped, just a little, that someone would surprise me. The morning of my graduation arrived with a sky so blue it almost felt like the universe was mocking me. I got dressed slowly, ironing every crease in my gown, adjusting the cap over and over until it sat just right. I stared at myself in the mirror, half expecting someone to knock on the door and say, "We changed our minds. We're coming with you." No one did. Downstairs, the kitchen was buzzing, but not for me. My mom was frosting cupcakes. My dad was adjusting balloons. My sister was laughing with her friends, already in her party dress, taking selfies. I stood at the bottom of the stairs for a moment, watching them. My cap in my hand, my throat tight. "Good luck, hon," my mom called from across the kitchen when she finally noticed me. "Take pictures. Text us when you're done," my dad added without looking up. I walked out without saying a word. The bus ride to campus felt longer than usual. I sat by the window and watched as families and cars passed me, some honking and cheering with "Congrats grad" signs taped to the doors. I kept my face still, but my chest was screaming. I didn't want to cry in public. I had promised myself I wouldn't. When I got to the venue, it was alive with joy. Parents were handing flowers to their kids, hugging them tightly. Friends were snapping group pictures, some in matching stoles, others wrapped in their national flags. Professors walked around with proud smiles. And then there was me. Alone. I checked in, pinned my name tag to my gown, and sat in the second row from the back. I didn't even bother saving seats beside me. One of my classmates, James, leaned over and asked, "Where's your family?" I just shrugged. "Caught up in other plans," I said. He gave a sympathetic nod and looked away, not sure what else to say. I didn't blame him. But as I sat there, watching the crowd and the stage, I felt something strange rise in me. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. I was here. I had made it. And nobody could take that from me. When they called my name, the sound felt distant. Like I was watching a movie I didn't belong in. I stood up, walked to the edge of the stage, and smiled because that's what you're supposed to do. The lights were bright. The applause felt polite. I shook hands with the dean, received my diploma, and turned to face the crowd for a photo. From that stage, I scanned the sea of faces. I didn't expect to see my family, but I looked anyway. Hope is stubborn like that. Rows of proud parents waved and clapped wildly for their kids. Some were crying, filming every second. In the far back, a little boy held up a sign that read, "That's my sister." And then I stepped down. Quietly. No one ran up to hug me. No one called my name again. I walked outside with the other graduates and stood under a tree near the edge of the lawn. I watched groups of families take pictures, carrying flowers, adjusting caps, sharing jokes. I took out my phone and tried to snap a selfie. I smiled, but it didn't feel right. I deleted it. Then I heard a familiar voice. "I knew I'd find you out here," said Professor Harmon. I turned. There he was, wearing a wrinkled suit, holding 2 coffees and a small bouquet of daisies. "You didn't think I'd miss this, did you?" he said, handing me one of the cups. I blinked a few times before I answered. "Honestly, I did." He laughed. "I've been teaching for 25 years. You're one of the hardest working students I've ever seen. I wanted to be here." Something cracked in me, and I couldn't hold the tears back anymore. Not from sadness, but from the weight of being seen, even if just by one person. We sat on a bench and talked. He asked about my plans, my goals. He listened. Really listened. And when he handed me the flowers, he said, "You deserve every bit of this moment. Don't ever let silence convince you otherwise." That evening, while the party lit up my house from blocks away, I sat in my room in silence, holding that small bouquet. I placed the flowers in a jar by my window and watched the lights flicker outside. I didn't feel bitter. Just tired. But somewhere in that quiet, something shifted. Maybe applause isn't the only way to be seen. Maybe presence is louder than noise. The days after graduation blurred into each other. My parents didn't ask how the ceremony went. My sister didn't mention it either. The house was still buzzing with leftover decorations, thank you cards, and gifts from her birthday party. I moved through it all like a ghost, present, but unnoticed. I started working more hours at the cafe downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it helped me stay busy. Most shifts were quiet. People came in, ordered their lattes or iced teas, and left. But one afternoon, just as I was wiping down a table, I heard someone call my name. It was Professor Harmon again. He smiled and pulled out a chair. I had a meeting nearby. Thought I'd stop in and say hello. I brought him a coffee on the house. He glanced at me, then slid a thin folder across the table. "That's for you," he said. Inside was a letter of recommendation. 2 pages, typed, signed at the bottom. But that wasn't what shook me, it was the nomination form paperclipped behind it. My final senior project, the one I'd poured months into, had been submitted for the National Undergraduate Impact Award. My heart stopped. "I didn't know if you'd submit it yourself," he said. And I wasn't going to let that work go unnoticed. You're one of the few students I've seen take struggle and turn it into something meaningful. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the pages. My hands shook. He added, "Winners get flown to the national conference. Big deal. It's televised. Even if you don't win, you deserve to stand among them." I swallowed hard. "Thank you." I didn't think anyone even saw it. He looked me straight in the eyes. I saw it. And I'm not the only one. That night, I sat with the nomination form in my lap, wondering if I should tell my family. But then I thought back to how they hadn't even noticed I'd been gone all day for graduation. I folded the paper and slid it into a drawer. This was something I had to carry alone, for now. For the first time, I wasn't hoping they'd show up. I was hoping I would. The awards ceremony was still a few weeks away, but something inside me had already shifted. I walked a little taller, breathed a little deeper. Not because of the nomination alone, but because it reminded me I wasn't invisible. Someone had seen my work. Someone had said it mattered. At home, everything continued as if my life hadn't changed. My sister was planning a weekend trip with friends. My parents were helping her pick outfits and book hotel rooms. They barely noticed when I came home late from work or left early in the morning. One evening at dinner, my mom asked, "Do you need anything for next month?" I froze, thinking maybe, just maybe, she was referring to the trip. To the ceremony. But then she added, "Because your cousin's baby shower is coming up and we need to budget." I nodded. "No, I'm good." They didn't ask where I'd be or what I was doing. And I didn't tell them. I wasn't bitter anymore. I just felt tired of waiting for them to care. There's a certain kind of exhaustion that comes from always hoping people will notice you without you having to beg for it. So I started planning quietly. I bought my own bus ticket to the city where the award event would be held. I rented a cheap room near the venue. I even saved for a blazer I found at a thrift store, something that made me feel like I belonged on a stage, even if no one else said it out loud. The night before I left, I sat at the kitchen table while everyone else was out. I wrote a short letter and left it on the fridge. It didn't say much. Just, "Gone for the weekend. Don't wait up. You're a graduate." I didn't know if they'd read it. But that wasn't the point. I wasn't running away to be noticed. I was stepping into a space I had earned. One where my name meant something. One where I didn't need a room full of cheers to feel worthy. Sometimes, your biggest supporters are strangers. And sometimes, the loudest silence comes from the people closest to you. But either way, I was going. And I was ready. The bus pulled into the city just after sunrise. The streets were still waking up, coffee carts opening their windows, joggers weaving through crosswalks, office lights flickering on floor by floor. I sat by the window, watching the skyline grow taller, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something close to peace. I checked into the tiny room I'd booked, bare walls, a thin blanket, one window that barely opened. It didn't matter. I wasn't there for luxury. I was there to stand in a room full of people who had also worked in silence. People who knew what it meant to fight quietly, to rise with no applause. The awards ceremony was held at a sleek conference center just a few blocks away. I got there early and waited in the check-in line with my invitation crumpled in my coat pocket. When I finally gave my name, the volunteer behind the table looked up and smiled. "Oh, here you are," she said, handing me a badge. "You're one of the finalists. Congratulations. You'll be seated near the front." I thanked her, though I couldn't fully process the words. Finalist. It sounded too big. Too unreal. My palms started sweating. The room filled slowly with students, professors, and some journalists. Screens lined the walls, looping short clips of nominated projects. I watched strangers walk by, their badges clipped proudly to their jackets. Some were with families, others with mentors, some completely alone, like me. When the event began, a host took the stage and welcomed everyone. She talked about the importance of student innovation, the need for fresh voices. And then, the screens lit up. A video started playing, my video. Footage from my project presentation. Excerpts from interviews I'd recorded. My name, in bold, across every screen in the auditorium. The room hushed. The host continued, "This year's top finalist built a project rooted not only in innovation, but in deep personal resilience. A story of quiet strength. Please help me welcome. My name again. Louder this time. Clear. Unmistakable. I stood. My heart was pounding. I walked toward the stage, hands trembling, but my steps steady. The applause felt real. Not just polite. Real. People were clapping because they saw me. Not as a side character. Not as someone's sibling. Just me. I looked out at the crowd and saw flashes of recognition. Some people had tears in their eyes. A few gave standing ovations. In that moment, I didn't think about who wasn't there. I thought about every night I stayed up writing, every shift I worked to pay for school, every time I swallowed hurt just to keep going. And now, my name was on every screen. After the ceremony ended, everything moved in slow motion. Strangers, complete strangers, came up to me to shake my hand, to ask questions about my project, to say things like, "You reminded me of my son," or, "You made me believe in students again." A woman from a nonprofit said she wanted to talk about collaborating. A man from a tech company slipped me his card and said, "We need people like you." I smiled and thanked them all, but my mind was still spinning. I kept replaying that moment, my name on every screen, the applause, the eyes that actually saw me. I stepped outside into the cold air and just stood there, alone on the sidewalk, letting the city noise wash over me. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. A text from my mom. It was the first one in days. "Hey, where are you? Your sister said she hasn't seen you all weekend." I stared at the screen for a while before replying. I was at the National Awards. I won. No emojis. No explanation. Just facts. The message was marked as read. No reply followed. I didn't feel angry. Just finished. Like something in me had finally closed a door. I spent the rest of the day walking through the city. I let myself wander through bookstores, sat on park benches, listened to the rhythm of strangers' lives. I didn't want a party. I didn't need a toast. I just wanted to exist in the quiet. In the peace of finally having nothing to prove. Later that night, back in the room, I turned on the TV and saw clips of the awards ceremony on the news. My face flashed on screen for a moment. The host's voice sang, a reminder that sometimes brilliance grows in silence. I didn't cry. Not this time. I smiled. Not because I needed the world to see me now, but because I had finally seen myself. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small medal they gave each finalist. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like everything I had carried up to this point had settled into that medal. All the hurt. All the trying. All the nights I felt like giving up. Now, it was just a reminder that I made it anyway. By the time I got back home, the news had already started to spread. It started with a post from one of the professors at the event. He'd tagged me in a photo from the award ceremony. The caption read, "This young man reminded us what perseverance looks like." His project wasn't just smart, it was personal. It was powerful. Then the university's official account reposted the clip of me on stage, adding, "Congratulations to our graduate and national award winner. You've made us proud." I didn't even have to say anything. The internet did it for me. My phone started buzzing, texts from classmates, coworkers, even people I barely knew from school. "Dude, that was you on the screen? You crushed it." Honestly gave me chills. I watched the whole thing. "You looked like you belonged up there." And then, a message from my sister. "Everyone's talking about you." Mom saw the post. She cried. I didn't know how to feel about that. A part of me wanted to feel vindicated. Another part just felt numb. That evening, as I sat in the living room, my parents finally broke the silence. My dad cleared his throat and said, "We saw the video." My mom added, "You should have told us it was such a big deal." I looked at them and replied gently, "I did tell you. You just weren't listening." They both looked down. My sister lingered by the doorway, unsure if she should leave or stay. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't angry. But I didn't sugarcoat it either. I didn't win for you, I said. I didn't go for revenge or attention. I went because I believed in the work I did, and I refused to let it be forgotten. The silence that followed was heavy, but different than before. It wasn't ignorance anymore, it was realization. My sister finally spoke. I didn't know it mattered that much. I looked at her and said, "That's the problem." No one did. And with that, I stood up, went to my room, and closed the door behind me. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I just needed space, to breathe, to process, to grow. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't need their approval. I had already given myself something more powerful than praise, proof. The days that followed were strange. At work, my manager shook my hand the moment I walked in. "You didn't tell us you were famous," he joked. Customers left bigger tips. A few even recognized me. One woman handed me a folded note with just 3 words written inside. "You inspired me." Back home, the energy had shifted. My parents tried harder, asking how my day was, offering to cook my favorite meals, asking about that job lead the guy from the tech company had mentioned in his message. I appreciated the effort, but it felt delayed. Like I had already walked miles past them, and they were only now realizing I was gone. I didn't hold a grudge. Not anymore. But I also didn't offer details. Not out of spite, just self-preservation. I was done trying to prove that I mattered. One afternoon, my sister came into my room while I was writing thank you emails. She sat quietly for a moment, then said, "I watched the whole award thing 3 times. The way people clapped when you won. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that." I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded. She kept going. "I think I got caught up in being the center of attention. I didn't see you." I looked at her, softening a little. "You don't have to apologize," I said. "You just have to remember." That seemed to hit her harder than anything else I could have said. Later that week, I got an official email. I had been selected for a fully paid fellowship with a startup accelerator. It wasn't just a job, it was a launchpad. A real one. I'd be moving to another city. A bigger city. One where no one knew me as the quiet kid at the kitchen table. As I packed, my dad stood in the doorway of my room. "We're proud of you," he said. I smiled, but didn't stop folding clothes. "Thanks." He hesitated. "I know we weren't there like we should have been." I looked up and said, "I needed to do it without you." That's how I knew it was real. He didn't say anything after that. Just nodded and walked away. I wasn't leaving out of anger. I was leaving because something inside me had outgrown this place. I didn't belong to their version of me anymore. And as I zipped up my suitcase, I realized I finally belonged to mine. The new city was loud, fast, and unfamiliar, and I loved it. It didn't care about who my family was or where I'd come from. It only cared about what I could build. The fellowship program moved quickly. Mornings were filled with brainstorming sessions, afternoons with mentor meetings, and nights with long walks back to my apartment, my mind buzzing with ideas. I was surrounded by people who were dreamers and doers, people who had also scraped their way up, one quiet victory at a time. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to prove I deserved to be in the room. I knew I did. One night after a workshop, one of the program leads pulled me aside. She said, "You carry yourself like someone who's had to stand alone before." I smiled. "A few times." She nodded. "Well, whatever it was, you turned it into something solid." That stuck with me. Because for so long, I thought being overlooked made me weaker. But now I understood that it trained me to listen more, to push harder, to never let silence define my worth. Back home, my family tried to stay in touch, texting occasionally, commenting on the press pieces that were starting to come out about the fellowship. My mom sent me a photo of my award hung in the living room. I appreciated the gesture, but it felt like a tribute to someone they never really saw until the world forced them to. And that was okay. I had made peace with it, not because they changed, but because I had. Every small thing I used to beg for, attention, praise, presence, I had learned to give to myself. Now, when I walked into a room, I didn't shrink. I didn't wonder if I belonged. I walked in knowing that I'd earned every step, every seat, every yes that came my way. And I learned something else, too. Sometimes the people who let you down are part of your story, but they don't have to shape the ending. We get to write that ourselves. A few months into the fellowship, I got an offer. It wasn't just a job. It was the job, a lead role in a social impact startup backed by a major tech firm. They'd seen my award speech, read my project, and followed my work since the program began. They didn't care about my last name or where I came from. They saw my work, my ideas, and most of all, my resilience. When I signed the contract, I sat alone in my apartment for a long time, staring at the screen. Not in disbelief, but in quiet reflection. Every time I wanted to quit, every moment I sat in silence while people celebrated someone else, every dinner where I smiled through disappointment, this was the moment I was unknowingly working toward. I called Professor Harmon to tell him. He picked up immediately. I knew it, he said before I could even speak. I told them you weren't just smart. You were steady. We talked for almost an hour. He didn't ask for credit. He just said, keep building. You're not just proving something, you're becoming someone others will look to. That night, I called my family too. My mom cried on the phone. I wish we'd done more. I really do. I didn't say, it's okay. I didn't lie to make her feel better. Instead, I said, I learned a lot from what you didn't do. And I'm still learning. She was quiet. Then she whispered, I hope one day you'll come home. I didn't promise that I would. And I think she understood. I wasn't angry anymore. But I was different now, wiser, stronger, freer. Every now and then, my sister sends photos from family dinners, or videos from her own college classes. Sometimes she asks for advice. I always reply. Not because I owe it, but because I chose to be better. We don't always get to rewrite the beginning of our story. But we do get to decide where it leads. And I had made my choice, forward. Months passed. The city started to feel less like a place I moved to, and more like home. The noise no longer overwhelmed me. The pace no longer drained me. I had found my rhythm. I had found myself. One evening, I walked past a local college campus. A graduation was just wrapping up. Grads in gowns took photos with families, clutching diplomas like golden tickets. For a second, I stopped. I watched them, not with envy, not with pain, but with a quiet sense of understanding. I knew that feeling. I knew the hope in their eyes. I also knew the hurt that sometimes followed when the people you love most don't show up. And I wished, deeply, that someone had told me back then what I knew now. So I walked into a nearby cafe, opened my laptop, and started writing, not for a grade, not for a prize, but for the version of me that had once sat alone at his own graduation, unsure of his place in the world. I wrote about how silence taught me to listen, how being overlooked taught me to see myself, how disappointment taught me to build without applause. I wrote about presence, my own. A few weeks later, that post went viral. People shared it across platforms, quoted it in classrooms, forwarded it to family members. One message came from a woman who said, "You gave me the courage to show up for myself when no one else did." And that's when it hit me. This story wasn't just about being seen. It was about becoming someone worth seeing, by myself, first. We don't all get the family we wish for. But we can become the person we always needed. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever waited for applause that never came, let me tell you this. You are enough. Even in the quiet. Especially in the quiet. So keep showing up. Keep building. Keep becoming. Because one day, the world won't just know your name. They'll remember it.